Hi friends, in my latest video on colour mixing I made a bit of a blooper in a jumble of words, and I'm here now to rectify, clarify and make sure you understand the distinction between neutralising colours and darkening them, and also avoiding muddy messes. I'm thankful to our hawk-eyed viewer Sigs.Scribbles, who commented that a natural neutral will darken colours and that using the complement will indeed neutralise them, and this is correct. The thing is, if you add too much complement, it will muddy the colours, but there is a balance to everything. Going to clarify all this, and then we'll create a little landscape and use both methods to illustrate how important they both are. Okay, to illustrate what I'm talking about, let's mix an orange out of the nickel Azo Yellow, here it is, and add a little bit of our permanent alizarin to it to make an orange. The alizarin was very strong, as is the yellow. Okay, so here we now have a lovely orange sample. If we wanted to neutralize this, I'm adding a tiny, tiny, weeny touch of blue. And now this here is a neutralized version of the orange. It's less intense. I'm just thinning it out a little bit to show you what the lighter values are like, and here the more intense ones. Now here I've mixed some natural neutral out of these three colors. 60% blue, roughly 30% red and 10% yellow. If I take a little bit of this same orange and add a little bit of neutral tint to it, it has neutralized the color as well, but it's actually meant to be a little bit darker. I'll just take some more color. That's more what I need. I'm going to thin this out so you can see what that one looks like. So on this side, using a natural neutral also neutralizes the color but also makes it darker, and adding a teeny touch of the complement neutralizes it. I'm using Arches 300 GSM cold press paper, a Paulina Bright No. 2 mop brush, and a Sumi Brush, great for texturing landscapes. I'm using Cobalt Blue, which is a cool leaning blue, nickel Azo Yellow, a warmish yellow, and permanent alizarin, a coolish red, all by Daniel Smith. When you're using a mixed triad like this, it allows for many more nuances of color to be mixed, especially important in atmospheric landscapes. You'll often find that mixed triads produce a richer neutral or black too. In our next video, we'll explore these comments and you'll see the differences for yourself. But for now, let's get to this landscape. Okay, so I have a little sketched out landscape here of our beautiful Australian landscape. This is in the Capertee Valley. And I'm going to start with a tiny little bit of red, really thin, really thin. This will be in the sky. And then I'll have a little bit of the yellow, which I'll then add the red to. So we're only painting with these three colors, but let's start with a little bit of really thin pink across the cliff face and the sky, and then proceed with some cobalt blue up the top. And as you can see, my paper is slightly tilted because this allows for the paint to run down the page and create a nice clean wash. I'm adding a little bit more blue and just laying it up on top. Okay, I'm going to continue my wash down the page with a neutralized version of the orange. So here is yellow, here is red, this is an orange now. And if I add a little bit of blue to this, it'll just be duller. And this is the color that I'm putting into the midground. And then wiping my brush and adding a little bit of the pink to the road and a little bit more of this on this grassy side. And now with a tissue, I've wet my tissue and squeezing out the water, and I'm going to lift some of this foliage here in this big tree to the side. And a little bit on this side. And even really softly here in the background hills. So we're left with a little bit of the dull yellow, but also a little bit of a texture in the mountain there. So now that we've done that, I can take some fresh yellow here and a little bit of blue and make a very thin green. I'm going to leave some of these white areas, but come in with a little bit of green, leaving some of the whites. Just very simply like that, and a tiny little bit on this side. Okay, and now I can let this dry. All right, now the first layer is dry, and I'm going to continue with the background hills. So a little bit of Cobalt Blue, and this time I'm going to neutralize it with a little bit of orange from before. So here's a little bit of orange. Might be a little bit much, so I'm coming in for some more blue. I kind of think that's a little bit not the right color for our Australian mountains, so I'm going to add a bit more blue and a little bit of red. But this is what it's all about. It's not a, oh dear, that's gone way too purple, so I'm just going to mix it over here. Coming in with some blue and the tiniest little bit of orange. Okay, so I'm coming around the cliffs and I'm going to leave some gaps for the actual rocky outcrops here. Bit like that, coming down. Have to make sure this is all a little bit dry, so quickly add in some blue. These are the cliffs. And a little bit in between there. And here between the tree trunks for some air between the trees. Okay, now that we've done that, I am going to hold my hand over here and flick a little bit of water onto this tree. We have our lights in there that I want to preserve, but I want to come on with a little bit of a deeper green. So our yellow and blue, and just come in with a little bit of variation of green, and maybe subdue it down a bit with a little bit of red. So it's a little bit bright, so let's add a little bit of red to it, and this now takes away the power of the strong green. So let's put a bit of that in. Okay. Now when this dries some more, we'll come in with the really darks. And I can even lift out just a little bit here to remind ourselves of the light that we want to preserve. Okay, and a little bit on this side, a different kind of tree. Now for the fields of grass, and this muted orange color, so we need it to be a bit thicker than it was before. And now we'll add a little bit of blue to that, leaving some little white lines in there, or from the previous layer, making that a bit lighter in the background. And with a purpley mix, which is the opposite color to this goldy color, a little bit of the side grasses. Now I'm going to use my Sumi brush because I like it for landscapes. And although this isn't super dry yet, it's dry enough. Put a little bit of grasses in here with our orange. And spreading that out for a little bit of the purpley, shadowy colors to the grasses. And now I'm going to mix a thicker, shadowy color for the tree. And so it's going to be a bit of thicker blue, a little bit of red, and a bit of our nickel Azo Yellow, and a little bit more blue, in fact. And now we can create some beautiful leafy effects on the shadowed side of the tree. Even a bit more blue, I think. When you add a little bit of the red to it, it can often be very overpowering, so you have to just go easy on it. And with my brush splayed out like this, I can create some grasses, and these are negatively created grasses because I'm actually painting the darks. And the tree trunks on this side. And a little bit on this side. And with a few little lines like this to suggest the way the land moves. A little bit of water to soften some of the darks. And by mixing purple out of the cobalt and a little bit of red. That's very runny, so a bit more red. Take some of this green to neutralize it. And that can be a beautiful shadow color on the road here. And then with either a natural neutral or a little bit of actual neutral tint, I can even put in a few more little dark bits just under here, which really suggest the darkness. And when this dries, it won't be as dark, so that's a really good thing. And when the background hills are dry, which they're not dry yet, then I can put the shadow in on the hills. So I'll just let that dry before we continue. Okay, now it's time to add a little bit of a darker blue to shadow in the mountain. So to the cobalt blue, I'm adding a little bit of neutral. And we can create a little bit of shadow up here on the mountain. I'd have to add a little bit more and a little bit more blue. Oh, and I forgot to paint those mountains at the back there, so I'll just get a little bit of a lighter blue now and paint those in there. Even if I leave a little bit of a gap and come in between the trees, it'll only make it more believable. Like that. Now to make the tree really stand out, we can add a little bit of our neutral to the green, to the shadows of the tree. So now getting a little bit of cobalt blue, a little bit of the nickel azo yellow, little tiny bit of red, creating a very dark mix, which is kind of close to our natural neutral now. And it would work equally as well with the tube neutral, but this will just give our tree that extra dimension that it needs. And I'm going to leave it not so dark up the top. Bit of darkness down here. So what did we learn? My little slip up actually highlights two powerful ways to control your colors. Darkening with a natural neutral or neutral tint for depth with minimum loss of color, and true neutralizing where you add a tiny touch of the color opposite on the color wheel for softness and atmosphere. Both are essential tools for every landscape artist. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments what's your favorite color mixing surprise. Subscribe for more watercolor tips and check out the description for more resources, and the link to the video leading up to this one is right here.